We're ready to launch. Greetings, everyone. I am Gemini Brett of More Than Astrology, and it's a treat to be here at EA Zoom meetings once again. The topic today is the ancient 12-step program, astrology, and the wishes, the wounds, and the wisdom of the 12 heavenly houses. So the first question is why 12? And a very common suggestion is because we have 12 moons in a year. So if we think of moons as new moon, like a lunation cycle, there's actually 12.37 on average. So it's not 12. I feel in relationship with a lot of ancient calendars that track 360 days, that once upon a time we might have seen 12 equal 30-day months, making a 360-day year. And the calendar topic is always a very interesting one. But whether that was ever true or not, we know today we have 365.24 days and change, and new moon about every 29.53 days on average. It's hard to get the solar and the lunar calendar to agree. It takes 19 years. And my next journey for EA Zoom meetings in November, I think November 30th, will be sacred astronomy for astrologers. And we'll be looking deeper into some of the subjects I'm going to share today about the directions. But I wanted to take a look at some sacred geometry and discuss why I believe there are 12 signs and 12 heavenly houses. But I thought before we launched in, we could just have a little pop quiz, so no need to answer, but maybe just feel into this at home. If I say, which house would represent your spouse? Which represents your resources? Which represents inheritance? Which represents your secret lover's, spouse's, brother's job? So these are games we can play with the astrological houses, right? But here's another thing we can do. Let's see. This is a picture that I took just the other day, just after September equinox. And I'm facing due west at the time that I took this photo. So we can see my shadow is heading off to the west and slightly to the north. And my question is, what house is the sun in at that time? So another question, what direction are you facing right now? And a challenge, everyone, maybe in your mind's eye or with your body, point to the 5th house. So we tend to have a pretty good recognition as astrologers today with the lists of what the houses represent. And as we are taught to learn in school, it tends to be a lot of memorization, regurgitation. And my quest more than anything else is to bring nature back to astrology. I believe astrology is much more than a language of symbols, as is often suggested, but rather is the poetic breath of nature. And that when we bring astrology into practices of embodiment, like connecting with the energies of the directions, facing these 12 houses as we study them, there's something experiential that I think brings us back to some of the ancient wisdom, maybe even before we were writing these things down on papers or chiseling them into tablets in any way. So in this question of why 12, one of my great entrances into the astrological mysteries, when I ask my favorite question, which is why, is informed through a practice of sacred geometry. Geometry is one of the old sacred sciences, the prerequisites for the astrological studies. Astrology was known to be the highest of the lower mysteries. And the 4 prerequisites of the sacred science is known as the quadrivium, which is number in nature, number in space, that's sacred geometry, number in time, musical harmony, and number in space and time, which is astronomy. So we're going to play with geometry a little bit today, and we'll look also at astronomy before and as a route to address the subject of the 12 heavenly houses, more from an experiential and storytelling level than just a list. So I invite you to engage with these houses directly, to engage with the directions directly. My practice is to sit in a particular direction and to give myself to that direction for 4 to 6 hours at night when the stars are out. So East, I'm Brett. I give myself to you tonight. Will you please give yourself to me? And that means that they could land a spaceship in the Northwest, and I'm not going over there. I've given myself to the East, and I just study what the eastern sky does. And the next night, I'll check out the South and the West and the North. So starting with any direction, though, I suggest you work sunwise. We used to call this sunwise. These days, we call it clockwise. For the northern hemisphere above the Tropic of Cancer, the directions in the chart are eastern horizon at the ascendant and south at the midheaven, western horizon at the descendant, and north at the IC. In the southern hemisphere below the Tropic of Capricorn, things get flipped. So still rising in the east, but reaching the height in the north, resting in the west, and rooting down below in the south. So the north and south get flipped. Between the tropics, it can get really fun and confusing because it can go either way. And that's a tale for another time. We'll address some of that stuff in my next session in November. All right, so I want to show this video of why I believe there are 12. Let's see, where is that thing? All right. So we start with the circle of spirit. And as above, so below, the same radius brings us the Vesica Pisces. And we could continue that way, but I move this way, clockwise or sunwise for the northern hemisphere where I sit. And 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 circles around 1 bring us 7 circles. And we get these 6-petaled flowers, the interior flower, the down and in, and the exterior flower, the up and out, the yin and the yang signs, which live together in a circle of 12. So my suggestion is that 12, because this is how creation creates. You can divide them above, below, divide them into the quadrants. But we have this ancient 12-step program called astrology that we are all after here. So here's the chart for the moment in Melbourne, Australia, where I know some of you are sitting currently. We've got Capricorn on the rise. Moon conjoined Pluto, just about to rise here. And in the reach, we're getting close to noon, or at midday, I should say, not noon, but the middle of the day when the sun reaches the midheaven, which in Melbourne, southern hemisphere below the Tropic of Capricorn, is the direction north. It's exactly halfway between sunrise and sunset. Sun will set later on here in the west and will root halfway between sunset and sunrise. So I'm going to take some of these planets away. We'll just look at the sun for now. So the sun, 6 Libra. Where is it going to be tomorrow? It's going to be at 7, moving about 1 degree per average, right? In this direction. And this is kind of how we know astrology from Aries to Taurus to Gemini to Cancer, etc. And that's called the secondary motion. So a really fun way to engage with the chart from a natural point of view is to ask this great question of, where is our planet on the chart? Where is Earth on the chart? And there's a philosophy that places Earth here, the Earth glyph, the cross of matter inside the circle of spirit, opposite the sun, exactly opposite the sun. And that's interesting, and we can learn a lot from that contemplation, but in many ways it's totally unnatural. So I want to look at why, and then investigate, where is the Earth on the chart really? So we'll go to space. This is solar system scope for this moment now. It's just like a chart, but looking at the solar system in a way that we're a little bit more familiar. So right now we have almost exactly a waxing half moon or first quarter moon, which is moon squaring the sun. We know that Venus and Mars will be conjunct on October 5th in a week. So looking from Earth, we can see this forming Venus-Mars conjunction, right? The aspects show up this way heliocentrically if we measure from Earth, like this would be the Jupiter-Saturn sextile. But we're not on the sun. If we were on the sun, we would see the Earth in the exact opposite sign of the zodiac that Earth sees the sun. We're gonna look from the edge here, and I'll bring in constellations, and we'll see the ecliptic, which is, we often say, the plane of our solar system, but it's actually the plane of Earth's orbit about the sun. All of the planets have their own plane. They're not exactly on the same path as the Earth about the sun, the ecliptic. Our solar system is relatively flat until we get out and we look at Pluto. That's Pluto's orbit way up there and also way down below. But the ecliptic plane, which is the Earth about the sun, if we extend that out towards infinity, we encounter the constellations of the zodiac and the great fixed stars of the heavenly belt, the circle of spirit. So right now, the sun from Earth's point of view is pretty closely aligned to Porphyry, the star of the priestess constellation. And I'll say the priestess and not Virgo, because signs and constellations are not the same thing. We'll be looking at that much deeper in November. And it's true that if we looked from the sun, we would see the Earth in the exact opposite constellation. But again, we don't live on the sun. So in Melbourne, where it's just about midday, in a way, the sun aligned to this constellation, the Earth below your feet is aligned this way, the opposite side. But here in Seattle, it's nighttime. And think about where in Earth, it's the middle of the night, where the Earth below your feet would be in the same sign as the sun. Yeah. So the Earth's not opposite the sun in the zodiac. And I feel that philosophy is both a result of and a contributor to the strange divorce between nature and astrology that we seem to have in our day and age. This is a geocentric look at the solar system for this time. And this really brings us into a reality when we're knowing the chart, because our charts are geocentric. Yeah, so our charts have Earth at the center. So in Australia, where it's just about midday, if I arrange this geocentric image or Earth-centered image of the heavens at this time, we'll see here Venus, Mars, Mercury, Sun, Jupiter, Saturn, Moon. And here on the chart, Venus, Mars, Mercury, Sun, Jupiter, Saturn, Moon, who's conjoined Pluto. Here's Uranus and Neptune. And I'm going to take Earth away because Earth is not down there between Neptune and Uranus, Earth is in the center of the chart, right? Geocentric. And the cross of matter inside the circle of spirit. The circle of spirit is the zodiac itself. The cross of matter, when we're on Earth, is our horizon, the ground, and the meridian, the north-south line. So I'm going to bring this to Seattle, where I'm sitting now. And in Seattle, in this moment at 6:20 p.m., got the 22nd degree of Pisces rising. Saturn just culminated. The sun's in the 7th house, about to set. So I want to look at a couple of things. I want to look at what we call the primary directions and the secondary directions. And it's interesting, in astrology these days, we're pretty much working with the secondary directions. So I'm going to fast forward this in time some. We'll get to the equinox degree on the rise, the 0 Aries degree on the rise. Looks like it's 6:37 p.m. local time. And we'll kind of start our journey here. So I'm going to go back to the heliocentric view. And just know that as we move through time, the Earth is moving this way. And what we see is the sun moving through the backdrop of the constellations this way. So from the priestess to the scales to the scorpion. Yeah. Here's November, and the sun will be aligned to the claws of the scorpion. So the general motion of the sun from what's called the secondary direction, the zodiacal motion, the annual motion of the sun is from the west to the east. See if I can play that in the chart here. I'm just going to look at the sun, and we will move through time. It's a really fun software, Intrepid, where I can do this. So here's the sun moving through the year. We're on October 25th. You can see it moving from the west to the east, moving through the constellations and the zodiac signs in the order that we know them, from Capricorn to Aquarius. Pisces will follow next, and then Aries, right? So that's the secondary direction. And we could consider that to be the different. Why? Because it takes the sun 365.242 and change days to circle the zodiac in this way. It takes the moon 27.3 days on average to do so, Saturn about 29.5 years, Jupiter about 11.86 years, right? The different. All of the planets have their own periodicity in their course around the zodiac in the secondary direction, the zodiacal motion, which is from the west to the east, or moving from the signs as we know them. And so 10th house to the 11th house, if the chart was static, like if you're looking at transits of Jupiter moving through your houses, for example, we know Jupiter's about to ingress Scorpio. What house is that for you in your chart? Sagittarius, starting in November of 2018 for Jupiter, and then on to Capricorn, right? So we see that motion of the planets in the secondary direction through the houses in this way that we track them, like from the 5th to the 6th, etc. All right. But what about the primary motion? And that's the diurnal motion, which is a result of Earth's spin. Yeah. So as the Earth is spinning from the west to the east, this is Earth in the middle. What we witness is the heavens rising, reaching, resting, rooting, moving from the east to the west. So let me go back to sunrise here in Seattle today. About there. And I'm now going to move this through the diurnal motion, or the primary motion. And in so many regards, this motion is what we could consider to be the same. I'll bring the moon into, and I'm just going to move this now ahead in time. And we'll witness that here we'll see the sun moving Oops, sorry. Wrong buttons. Here we go. Back to sunrise. And the motion's this way, right? So the secondary motion, the different, is from the west to the east, but the primary motion, the same, is from the east to the west. Northern hemisphere above the Tropic of Cancer, where I am in Seattle, rooting at midnight for the sun in the direction north, rising at the eastern horizon, reaching in the direction south, midday, halfway between sunrise and sunset, and resting here in the west. The rise, the reach, the rest, and the roots. Why is this the same? Because it's a result of Earth's spin. Earth is the middle of the chart, cross of matter, inside the circle of spirit. Earth is spinning from the west to the east. So we notice the heavens moving from the east to the west. And because it's a result of Earth's spin, for the most part, the planets are doing this in the same way. We could say on average 12 hours above the horizon and 12 hours below. That's not really true. It depends on what sign planets are in and then also where you're looking from, and that's a tale for another time. But there's a look at the primary and secondary directions. And I think it's important that we feel into these houses and that we experience these houses from the perspective of both of these directions. All right, so I'm gonna say here's the heliocentric image, which is fun for us to know, but our charts are geocentric. This makes a lot of sense because we live here on Earth, yeah? And in fact, we measure astrology from the very center of Earth, not from the Earth's surface where we are witnessing the heavenly happenings. This is the reason why some of you may have noticed that the time on your chart was different than your time of witnessing the eclipse recently, because the eclipse, for us to witness this, is from the surface, and that's called topocentric. But we measure astrology from the middle of the Earth, geocentric. And there's a beauty to that, you see, because if we're all over the world right now, if we all stretched our hands and stood up and pointed straight above us, we're all pointing to a different star out there. But if we drew a line through our hands, through our feet, they all connect, all of our lines connect in the heart of Gaia, in the center of our planet. So the way that I feel astrology is that the planets each are notes, each have their instrument, playing the symphony of the moment now, the great heavenly harmonies that resonate in the heart of our planet Earth. And she broadcasts that symphony of now out to all of us at the same time. So just because you don't see it doesn't mean you don't be it. I like to say in a very poor grammatical way to suggest that you don't have to be in the path of a total solar eclipse, for example, to experience its energy. Though there is something about being there, witnessing this majesty, this amazement. And of course, we're not witnessing from outside of Earth's point of view, but we are here on Earth. Yeah, so where are the planets? In the sky, in this moment now. All right, so that was a Solar System Scope, by the way, that program that we were just looking at. It's a really brilliant program you can play with online for free. Unfortunately, it took the geocentric option away. So I haven't updated mine for years for that reason. But there's another program, and it's a free program that I really love to utilize to check out the astronomy of the situation. So here's the sun in this moment, and this is cast for Seattle. And this is the midheaven. This green line, the meridian, runs north-south. And right now it's just about the Aries, 0 Aries degree rising, 0 Libra degree setting. I can tell that because of how the ecliptic, which is this red curve here, is aligning almost due east, due west. That's something we'll dive much deeper into next time around. If I take away the ground, we can see this interesting shape, the cross of matter inside the circle of spirit. And here in Seattle, the galactic center has a very low altitude reach. So it's a kind of elongated cross, not that plus cross that we're used to seeing. If I brought this towards the equator, we would get a better image of this Earth glyph. Not exact there. I'd actually have to go down to the Tropic of Capricorn. Story for another time, but here's that cross of matter inside the circle of spirit. So a really important energy, I believe, or exercise to connect to the energy of these heavenly houses is to really get to know these directions and what do they do, right? Because our division of 12, these guys, we start at the ascendant here, as we know, right? So the eastern horizon, and first house, second house, third house. In a quadrant house system, Placidus, which is so popular now, Coke, I use Porphyry. And why use Porphyry house systems? Well, I use them because I can see them in space with my face. When I'm on my game and I'm out under the night sky, I can draw the Porphyry houses of that moment, usually within 1 to 3 degrees for all of the cusps. And that's something that's one of my favorite things to teach, to bring the truth that this weird thing with all of these strange symbols in glyphs and whatnot is actually nature. It's a real happening. And we can see the cross of matter. In a sense, we can't see anything below the horizon line, the horizontal line, right? Because that's the ground. So let's dig into that a little bit. If I bring the ground back, the only houses that are available to us are up here. So in a quadrant house system, the cusp of the midheaven is the place of the reach, which in the northern hemisphere, above the Tropic of Cancer, is due south. And in the southern hemisphere, below the Tropic of Capricorn, is due north. In between the tropics, it gets pretty interesting. So our house divisions are first, second, third, which leads us to the IC, the bottom of the chart, right? And in the northern hemisphere, above the Tropic of Cancer, that direction is due north. All right, so then the fourth, fifth, sixth brings us to the descendant, the western horizon. 7, 8, 9 brings us to the midheaven, direction south, where I live. And then 10, 11, 12. And why I love Porphyry so much is because it just splits these quadrants, as we call them, into 3 equal slices. Yeah. So if I know where this is, and I do when I'm outside because it is due south in the northern hemisphere, I can turn my back to the North Star, Polaris, over here, right? And if I turn my back to the North Star, then I am facing due south, and I can find the midheaven of the moment. All right, so let me bring the ground back in, make this a little bit less confusing. And I'm also going to come home to Seattle. All right. So the North Star is a great gift for those of us in the Northern Hemisphere because it really helps us get directions. The North Star changes over the course of the precessional cycle, a long cycle of 26,000 years. We live at a time where we have the most dialed in North Star possible, according to the modern model. The star is Polaris, right? And the spine of Gaia, or the axis of Earth, is pointing towards that star. So if I play this through time, as the Earth is spinning this way, what we notice is the heavens moving this way. Let me take the cartoons away. So the North Star is so brilliant because it basically doesn't move, and we can witness the heavens moving around it. Can really dial us in. It's due north. It beats the magnet by a long shot. In the southern hemisphere, there's not a south star right now, as you know. So connecting to the North Star is a really wonderful way to connect to the directions altogether. So one thing I will do is get out and face my chest to the North Star and spread my arms out here. And now I know that my right arm is pointing east and my left arm pointing west, and my back is due south. My back is to the midheaven. I like to do this with my right hand because it's facing east, and the east is the rise. And this with my left hand, the west rests, right? The east only comes up, the west only goes down. Yeah. So I'm getting a little further into this area than I meant to today, but I'm gonna finish this thread, I guess, a little bit. The North Star is due north, but it's not the energy of the direction north. Just look at the sun here, right? The sun sets in the west. Where does it go? Who knows? Great mystery. But if we take the ground away, we can see that it's the very middle of the night, halfway between sunset and sunrise, when the sun norths. And that's why I call this the roots. And again, this is the northern hemisphere look right now, okay? So the roots, and as we know, the sun will rise, and this is true everywhere on Earth, in the eastern sky. The east is the place of the rise. And so this is a diurnal look at the energy of these different directions. Suddenly that happens. The sun comes back from the underworld, wherever it was, down below, or however that thing happens. And then it's going to make its way to the reach at midday. Direction south in the northern hemisphere, north in the southern hemisphere. Though again, between the tropics, it can go either way. It can even be directly overhead twice a year for tropical locations. The east is the rise, the south is the reach, the west is the rest, the north is the roots. Or to make this global, we'll just say the east, we'll just call them the 4 R's. The rise, the reach, the rest, and the roots. The rise, the reach, the rest, and the roots. Okay, so if we look at this from the perspective of the houses, and I could number these here, but I think you all know 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, right? So the cusp of the 12th first, the ascendant, is the rise. The east, it ups. The cusp of the 9th, 10th is the reach, the height of our light. Yeah, so our highest visibility, our brightest energy. The west, the cusp of the 6th and the 7th, is the rest, where the heavens marry the earth. The sun comes to set, bringing us that very beautiful time of day. And the roots, the cusp of the 3rd and the 4th houses, the deepest part of the chart, the great mystery in the places below. So that just to bring us into kind of a natural energetic of the houses by direction. One more thing we can do. I really don't even need to see the planets for this one. I'll take them away. Let's check out what the east does. The east only ups. And I really like to look at this from the equator. Stellarium, folks, is brilliant. It's free, so highly recommended. I'm actually going to take a couple of these lines out of here too. Look at what the east does. I'll speed it up a little bit. The east ups. And if you notice, I'll zoom out a little bit. especially from the equator. Stars that rise south of east head to the south, and stars that rise north of east head to the north. So the east is like this permanent fountain of youth. It only ups. And it kind of does the Aries glyph, right? So when I face east, I kind of like to open up my shoulders that way. But I've really been coming into this lately that there's only 2 of our glyphs that have horizontal lines. Gemini, we can say does, but it used to be drawn just as 2 vertical lines. So we have the horizontal line in the Pisces glyph and the horizontal line in the Libra glyph. And I really believe that these glyphs themselves are reflections of tropical astrology. Because when we look at Pisces on the east, I mean, just look, if we put that line on the horizon, you see stars moving towards the south or towards the reach, and stars moving the other way. So let's get back into stellarium. And I'll take the ground away, but let me bring in a line for the horizon before I do. Hopefully this isn't making anybody sick. It's moving pretty quickly here. Can you see the Pisces glyph? You see this motion? These glyphs have so much magic in them, and I haven't decoded them all, but they're very physical, earth-based representations of the heavenly happenings. All right, ground again. Well, let's say this is the 12th house. I gotta slow this down. One of the things we say about the 12th house is that it is hidden things. Why would that be? And I argue this is a very diurnal expression. The primary motion, the same, the result of Earth's spin. As Earth literally is falling towards the east, we notice the heavens rising there, right? Or do we? I mean, usually you're going to have something more like this going on, you know? Let's get some other ones going. There'll be some stuff there in the east, some trees, some buildings, some mountains, maybe some Mayan pyramids, depending where you are. It's very hard to see in the moment now what star is rising. We don't have these great flat horizons usually to work with. And this is one of the reasons why we built these pyramids and ziggurats, so we could get up and take a look. We don't need to see east, though, to know the ascendant. We can actually work with the south to do that. Let's follow the motion of the sun, and we'll move sunwise, which in the northern hemisphere is from the east to the south, right? So in the northern hemisphere, it moves clockwise. This is actually what the clock was based on, the sunwise motion, rising in the east, reaching in the south, resting in the west, rooting in the north. So we see the south has this kind of sideways motion, yeah? And everything peaks if you just look due south. Like here's Rigel right now. That's as high as Rigel will get. Here's Sirius culminating or reaching in the south. And then we're going to drop back down to the west. So if the 12th house in the east is hidden things because horizons don't always allow us to see, or we can't always see the horizon because of trees and stuff, why isn't that the same in the west? Let me get some pyramids back in here or something. Because that's not something that we say about the 7th house here. We say the 7th house is partnerships, relationship, right? Well, first of all, notice that this is where the heavens are coming to marry Earth. The heavens are falling down here at the 7th house, which is actually a result of Earth rising in the west, right? So it's a fun thing to contemplate. And if we look over at the Libra glyph, you know, especially at equinox, when at the equator, the sun rises due east, culminates directly overhead, no shadows at noon, and then rests, sets due west. Just look at the sun setting in that Libra glyph, you know? So marriage, and my argument is that this sacred marriage is maybe something that is too glorious for us to gaze upon. There's other reasons too, but I would say that the eighth, which we often associate with death, might be that for this reason, because if this pyramid was higher, we're actually going to lose the sun in the eighth house as it's going down to rest. And that time of seventh house, sun setting, I mean, really, it's the most beautiful time of year. Now, this whole idea that the 12th house is like Pisces, the seventh house is like Libra, that's a very new concept, right? My awareness suggests that's Zip Dobbins, just decades ago. And I think that's a beautiful way to enter the energies of the houses. We want to be careful to know that signs and houses are different things. But I will say, just looking at least these two glyphs of Pisces and Libra, that does seem to have been alive in the contemplations of the people who created those glyphs at that time. I'm just realizing my computer memory is full, so I think I should stop recording before things really freak out. Linda, I know you're recording on your end anyway. All right. Okay, so diurnal contemplations of the heavenly houses. And this really is just an encouragement, saying, yeah, stellarium's cool, but go outside, be with the West. If you want to be with the ninth house, the place where the traditions say the sun joys, gaze over here somewhere towards the west of the reach. For those of us in the northern hemisphere, that's west of south. For those of you in the southern hemisphere, let's just check that out, actually. We'll go down to Melbourne. In the southern hemisphere, the sky's moving in the opposite direction. The south is the place of the roots. And everything's rising in the east, reaching in the north, and resting in the west. So maybe in the southern hemisphere, clocks should move in the other direction. And I could say that, but again, in the tropics, things go both ways. So we kind of have to have a universal system. These systems, like our charts that put east on the left on the chart wheel, right? And the southern hemisphere, below the Tropic of Capricorn, really things are rising on the east. If you want to watch the sunwise or starwise motion, it's a thing to consider. So if you wanted to gaze at the ninth house and just feel into its energy, sit here. Look towards the west of north if you're in the southern hemisphere, towards the west of south in the northern hemisphere. Feel that time when the sun is in that house. Look around you, see what's happening at that time of the day, feel that temperature, right? So back home right now to Seattle, and when I say point to the fifth house, well, where is it? What do I want to do? This. The fifth house, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is between the roots and the rest. In the northern hemisphere, this is the direction north, but below ground. This is towards the west. It's not always due west. So the fifth house, where I sit, is over here towards the north, somewhere down here. All right. So what does that energy tell us? And quit out of that. And I just suggest you go and have a look. So if I go back here, well, my shadow at this point was facing almost due west. Yeah. That means the sun is what? Opposite, east. This is very early in the morning. The shadow is pointing towards the sixth house. The sun at this time is in the 12th house. Now, if I wanted to be a better sundial, I would have actually had to be leaning back halfway towards the ground, which I'm not a good enough yogi to do anyway, because I was standing at 45 degrees north. And the trick with the sundial is to aim what's called the gnomon in the same angle as the spine of Gaia. So there's this really cool thing that the altitude of, I'll say the North Star for the Northern Hemisphere, the altitude from the horizon 0 to 90, the zenith, the altitude of the North Star equals your latitude on Earth. So there in Lincoln City, Oregon, where I was last week, it's exactly halfway between horizon straight ahead and zenith straight above. Yeah. So the trick with the sundial is you got to aim the gnomon in that direction. That way the shadow tracks the same angles during the course of the day, every day of the year. So I was not a great accurate sundial here, which is good because I would have fallen over, but it does a good enough job. And I think this is a really cool way to do some physical shadow work, or we could say shadow play, is to really work with the shadow during the course of the day. You'll see that it moves sunwise, but opposite the sun. And if we have the courage to turn our back to the light, which most modern New Age spiritual paradigms suggest you never should, we have to look at our shadow, right? And so in the direction of the roots, yeah, so north in the Northern Hemisphere, we will never, ever, 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 ever see the sun or the moon or any of the planets. That's where they go to sleep. But that's where we see the shadow, the buried ones, the ancestors, you see. And that's the cusp of the fourth house, the IC. So we can practice diurnally, and I could take that whole mission here. But what I thought I would do is kind of journey into this through the course of birth, and we'll feel into the wishes and the wounds and the wisdom of the 12 heavenly houses from that point of view. Okay. So the 12th, hidden things. And the 12th has a really tough rap, right? I mean, the drama of your karma and self-sabotage and other things that, you know, we can't quite see, but take us out. You know, a house of enemies, they would say back in the day. What's going on with that? You know, we look at that Pisces glyph again. The opposite of the Pisces glyph is the Vesica Pisces, an ancient symbol of the yoni, yeah, the birth of all creation. And so it was at that time of the ascendant, the cusp of the 12th and the 1st, that's when we came in, right? So not all of us in that regard, some of us came C-section style, but when we took our first breath, yeah, that's when we moved from the 12th house into the first house. That's like a dragonfly. We turned from some water being into an air being. We came into this world. And that, as we know, is what we are interested in casting this chart for, the moment that represents you, the soundtrack of the celestial symphony. That is your jam, you know? To me, that's the fate of the thing, but free will, right? Because we can dance to a song any way we choose. We can choose even not to dance at all, but that's not the case for you, because here you are digging into the mysteries that we call astrology. We don't tend to go there unless we have questions about life, and those great questions get us dancing. So what was alive during the 12th house time? This is the 2.5 hours before your birth. And this is the last couple hours of labor, right? Some of you out there have had children, so you've experienced it from the other side. Can we remember our experience as children? We're riding in the waters of the womb. That's what I call the 12th house, you know. Maybe the safe place where we've been developing, feeding from that snorkel, you know, in the darkness, maybe more connected to the mysteries that we're all one, whatever it might be. And suddenly contractions, you know, and this crazy traumatic happening. And here we are, you know, born into this world. So it's this downward motion. Again, look at that Pisces glyph, you know, funneling us down, or even the Aries glyph at that cusp too, like bringing us down into this world. So C-section maybe, I mean, I wonder about like epidurals or other medications used to ease labor pains. For me, there's something in the true grief when somebody transitions from this world to the next that actually is giving them an energetic cord to ride into the next place. And I think the same is one of the great gifts of mother and her labor pain that allows this child coming into this world a current of energy for this great transition, this great becoming. Yeah. So sometimes C-section, I've done readings for folks who were born with the cord wrapped around their neck. And I'm really interested in it. It's almost like, you know, until that thing was unwrapped and you took your first breath, that was like your birth canal. You see what I mean? But either way, we're coming out of that place, that hidden place, and into this birth canal. So we know this first house is our own awareness, right? So for me, I try to come in sideways, not so nice to mom, you know, and turned with forceps, and then I can't remember, but I assume kind of yanked out by some dude in a mask under strange spotlights, you know, spanked just to see if I could cry. That whole situation, the cord cut instantly. There's a lot of trauma there. There's a lot of trauma in this entrance. And there's a lot of trauma, as we know, in the Earth game in general. This is one of the great gifts, it would seem, for our growth. But that gift is often wrapped in pretty crazy looking paper, right? So what are the reasons for the seasons? You know, it's a really wonderful question that I'm asking driving today and seeing all the leaves start to change up here in Seattle. And that means soon come the rains. So the wishes, I believe, of the first house are just individuation, coming into self, and healing some of this confusion. You know, I mean, shortly after this time of me being spanked to see if I could cry, somebody said Brett. And I had to imagine, I was like, what the hell is a Brett? Right? Because just moments ago, I was everything, or who knows what's happening in the great mysteries in the waters of the womb. But it's certainly different than this place. Yeah. So there's some great quest in the first house, where we are heading. I'm very interested in the ascendant, which they used to call the helm, as the direction of our soul path. And that's something I'll go deeper into in the next share. What are the wounds there? You know, pardon my language, but who the fuck am I? And what am I here to do? You know, and just feeling lost in that sense of the disconnect from the all, right? I mean, that great, maybe greatest pain of universe reflected in the split of spirit and soul. And I find, you know, in my own life and in sharing with friends who are very authentic, and I'm honored to sit with a lot of clients who can really share their own pain and wounding. It's like we are reenacting that greatest division of spirit and soul to dance here in the earth game, and to have this experience and to heal this experience, which heals and climbs that ladder of the above as well. Yeah. So the first house is endless, you know, and these are just these questions that I've come to contemplate as I sit in that direction east, but towards the roots, so towards the north for me, and gaze down into the ground and imagine this birthing process, you know. So here I am in kind of in a houses like the signs way. I like to think of the first as your spark of life. You know, here you are. What are you going to do? What's the mountain that you're going to climb in this lifetime? Many say that the first is the body. But I find that really that's the second house, that in a sense, you're not in your body until the cord is cut. Yeah, the snorkel, right? So this is this place where you've been feeding from. And I was really, I don't know, I guess encouraged when I spoke to some friends who were doulas recently, who say, yeah, it's usually a couple hours after birth when you're meant to cut the cord. Which is really interesting, right? Because that's when the second, the cusp of the first and second will come to meet you. And by the way, this is another way to look at this journey from the first to the 12. I'm not sure if my hand's going the right direction on video. By the way, sometimes we know things get flipped. But so we can see transits moving in that direction. But from a diurnal point of view, if you consider yourself to be your ascendant, your rising star will be the last thing to rise, reach, rest, root, and come all the way back to you, right? So we can see that motion from either perspective of primary or secondary directions. So here, a couple hours in, you know, I mean, what if I was born at home in candlelight, caught by dad, who was actually like trying to be at a World Series game when I was born anyway, you know, but in that safe space, the natural way. I mean, it's fascinating at this time that we live where natural and normal seem to be totally opposite things, right? So, I mean, I've talked to a lot of people who were born that way. A lot of my friends are birthing children that way. Now, that was not the case for me. But what I'm told by friends of birthing magic is that, yeah, you give the child some time to kind of come into this awareness that suddenly, oh, I'm a being, right? I'm not everything anymore. And you lie the child on mother's side. Maybe dad introduces himself. We breathe together. Don't cut the cord right away because there's been enough trauma already, right? And there's really important medicines coming through for some time. So one thing I think in like a rebirthing process and reclaiming and coming back into healing some of that trauma of our entrance, that's another place to look at. What was it when the cord was cut? Yeah. And so suddenly I'm shocked now into the truth that my spark is in a vessel. I have a body. And what's the body need? I need to eat, right? So this is baby crawling to the breast for something to eat. Yeah. So really the wishes of the second for me in this regard are what feeds my soul? What feeds my soul? Now, what sign is on the cusp of the second for you? For me, it's Cancer. Am I fed by family, by nurturing, by, you know, sensitive softness and expression of emotions when in a healthy place? Yeah, so I contemplate, I live alone, I travel a lot. Like last night I was in this amazing art portal like all night with a deep core soul family of creators, and I really thrive in that space and I'm really fed by that space. So that makes a lot of sense for me. And then we can play astro games, right? Cancer, moon, where is moon for me? How does that feed into what it is that feeds my soul? I mean, if Sagittarius is the cusp of your second, is adventure feed your soul? Does seeking spirit feed your soul? So play that game a little bit. The wishes are just to be fed. So they say it's money. Well, money helps me eat, you know. And they say values, and I think especially value of self. This is a really important consideration in the second house when we're addressing some of the healing and the wounding. Imagine this. Imagine you're just a tiny baby, 5 days old, and you're crying for food as you do. And there's that moment when your mother, and bless her, I mean, maybe her first child, and she's just transitioned from this place of free, independent lady into a mother, you know? And you need food, and she goes, oh, because she just wants to sleep. Can we blame her? No. Can the baby? How's the baby feel about that? In a culture where giving is receiving, where receiving is taking, the idea that I need to eat, that I need anything, is that okay? Can you feel into that wound and feel into that wound of the first time where mother knows exactly what you need, but her need for sleep or rest or whatever it may be supersedes that. Now, again, I'm not trying to point fingers at mothers here. Bless you all. Thank you. Yeah. But just feel that as a little child, you know, and bring that into your own chart now. Look at the planets who live there. Look at that sign on the cusp. See how those needs are. I mean, should we feel guilty just for needing to eat? You know, if it's Libra on the cusp of your second and you really need to relate, should you feel guilty about that? And the new age is laying that there's no soulmate trip on you, whatever it may be, right? So feel into that in your nativity, and sit in that direction of the second house, and look at the light outside when the sun comes to that place. That's one other image I wanted to show, because we often think about 7 through 12 above the horizon, diurnal in the light, and 1 through 6 below the horizon, in the darkness, in the night. Yeah. And we can think of that as without and within. And I think they're really important expressions of the above and the below in that regard. But in nature, it's not so black and white, is it? So there's this image that I flashed for a second earlier, but that I really love, which is, what if we put the yin yang with the light rising in the east and then going into set in the west? Well, even when the sun is in the 6th house, it's still light out, you know. Even when the sun is kind of coming into the 12th, there's still some darkness, you know. So it's this 4th house time that I see when we're in full dark, in this 10th house time, the midheaven, when we're in full light, and all expressions of it. I see the sun joying in the 9th and the moon joying in the 3rd in this image as well. Something to play with. So how do we play with the 3rd? Well, baby needs to eat, or baby needs to be left alone. Get that thing out of my face. Or baby needs to be held. Smother me until I sleep, please, but not too hard, just like this, you know? And mother's probably like, what do you need, child? Why is the baby crying again, right? And she has to develop that psychic connection to the child. So 3rd, communicating these needs of the soul, right? So we'll use this image of the baby in this way, but take this into the babies that are us today as adult beings, you know? How do we communicate these deep needs of what it is that feeds my soul? So first of all, those wounds of the 2nd, is it okay? Is it okay to need something? The wound, and how do I feel when I know what I need, but it's not received? The wounds of the 3rd, how do I learn to speak this into the world? Yeah. So they say the house of the goddess back in the day. Well, that's who we have to learn how to speak with. That's why I feel the 3rd has that ancient association. In modern times, siblings. Why? Because they teach you how to speak and they compete for your food, you know, and a lot of other things. So atmosphere, what's around us, we're really coming in a way, 1st, the spark of life, 2nd, the earth, the body, 3rd, the air, the mind, communication, and the truth that it's not just me. I mean, even for food, I have to communicate with another being, right? So in the 3rd, we develop that communication, we develop that awareness of other people. 3rd, 7th, 11th, and these kind of correlations of Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius, the air signs, is a lot of communication. There's a lot of othership in all of those signs, not just Libra, right? So the wishes are learning how to speak this truth that my soul needs food in whatever way that may be. The wounds is nobody can understand what I am trying to say here. Or I haven't learned yet how to speak. I'm a 41 and a half plus year old man, and there are many wounds of me not knowing how to speak what it is that I need. Yeah. And I really feel that alive in the 3rd. So I've called this thing the wishes, the wounds, and the wisdom. Well, where does the wisdom come from? It's the marriage of these things, the marriage of the wishes, the marriage with the wounds. Yeah. This is how we learn in life. In astrology, we often love to say that's the shadow and that's the light of this archetype. Well, truly, it's those two in their dance, in their marriage, that help us find true wisdom. Yeah, we don't want to just leave behind this thing that we're trying to get away from. We're not growing away from something, we're growing out of something. Yeah. So if I can learn to communicate my needs and it's heard and received, then I'm coming into opening my heart, coming into my water. I'm safe. I can trust. I'm loved. I'm held. Yeah. That darkest, lowest place of your chart. And the astronomer wants to say not the lowest, but the place where all planets are lowest in their expression there at the roots of the nativity. Okay. Sun there, the middle of the night. The sun sets and it's cold but dry. If you're out in the middle of the night, you know this time when suddenly it's real cold because it just got cold and wet by temperament. And you can feel it in your bones. That's that place on the nativity. That's that cusp of the fourth. Such an imperative place for us to truly connect to, truly feel into, deep wounding in that place. Yeah, ancestral wounding in that place. I feel a very core connection to the mitochondrial DNA in that place. That's a long tale for another time, I think. But did I learn how to speak my needs, and were they received so I could feel safe and I could trust? Because until I do, I will not open my heart. You know, I will not even allow love until I know that I'm secure. So we can think of the first quadrant just leading us up there, the education necessary to come into that place. And I love thinking of that medicine wheel and the cross of matter inside the circle of spirit. And this is a way that we often divide the houses, right? 4 seasons of 3 as we do the calendar year. But back in the old calendars, like in Egypt, Kemet, 3 seasons of 4. And I think this is a really fun way to explore the houses as well, to think of, and they've been called, I didn't know this when I first connected to it, but I do this a lot. I contemplate these things out in nature. I have these cool understandings, and then I'll find the book that's like somebody's understood that for a long time. And I feel that's good. I feel it reminds me that I'm kind of on my path. I'm moving along. So if we think of it as 4, and I've heard them called the personal 1st through 4th, the interpersonal 5th through the 8th, and the transpersonal the 9th through the 12th. I like that a lot. And if we do relate them to, in this sense of the spark of life, the body, the mind, learning, communication, my heart, the 4th, you'll see that in these 3 seasons of 4, we're always entering the personal, interpersonal, transpersonal in a fire. And the goal is the heart. The goal is the water. Yeah. So the goal of this first season of 4 is coming into my heart. How can I do that if I don't feel truly safe and held, and that these needs are answered? Yeah. So the wishes in the 4th are to have that. Have you ever? I mean, really, totally felt safe and protected and held? I hope so. Have you ever not felt that way? I have. So what are the wishes and the wounds, and how does the wisdom result from there? And so instead of a bunch of answers, I'd rather give you a bunch of questions today. I'm kind of like that in general. Some of you know. If we can do this, if we can come in and open the heart, I mean, just think of the challenge in a world where abandonment is so often the theme, or asking and not receiving, needing, you know. If we can open the heart, then by the time we get to the 5th, we are fully elemental. Yeah, so the 1st, my spark of life. The 5th, I am the creator being. I remember. And we can read on the lists that the 5th is risks, gambling, games, romance, affairs, you know. But I think that those are all a result of me in my 5th place, knowing I can do anything I want. I am the creator being. I'm fully elemental. I'm fully alive. Now remember, we're still below the horizon. And when the sun is in the 5th, it's dark, you know. It's very close to the middle of the night. We've just lost the light in that regard. But this is the place, I think, when we're looking in this direction, 1st through the 5th, where we are really connecting to that truth that we are radiant beings and we can do anything. I can believe I can fly. You know, and the 6th might say, well, I wouldn't suggest trying because you don't have wings and you probably will die, right? So that fifth essence of being fully elemental is such an amazing thing. I think in so many regards, this is what we are learning to reconnect to the truth that we are manifesting, that we are creating this reality. And we can do anything we want, says the fifth house. So that's a wish. What are the wounds? No, you can't. You know, I mean, for me, saxophone player, and it was like, oh yeah, you're good at that, but I suggest getting a degree so you can have a real job, because musicians tend to starve and whatnot, you know. So who's on the cusp of your fifth? Who lives down there? Is this a place where you are called to be like the sun in its adventure down towards the roots? Is it still bringing some of the energy of the above when I look at it in that direction? And I just love this contemplation of where would I be? What would I be doing if I always knew I was fully elemental and I am a creator being? And can I take responsibility for that? So that's one of the trips that can really lead to quick wounding in this regard too, and deep wisdom. The sixth, I like to think of as polishing the stone. And in the alchemical works, it might be a place where we reach what might be considered the lesser stone. So the fifth, you know, we're starting to make our way in this direction up towards the place of visibility, up towards the place of light. But what do I have to bring to the table? You know, I could do this and this and this and this. I could do anything. I could do everything. Well, what will it be? And the sixth, I truly believe, really helps us get into what can work, what can be real, what do we want to do, this idea of sacred work, of a yoga. It's also, we know, in so many regards, taught as the place of illness. Why? Well, if it is sacred work, you know, we can get sick trying to figure out what that is. We can get sick trying not to. We can get really sick if the vision has come in of what it is that I'm meant to do, but I ignore that at all costs. Yeah. Or what if I'm giving all of my energy to some work that I don't dig in any regard? We know we can think of the six as well, which in a way would be in this interpersonal quest for relationship realm, the daily practice, the way that we take care of the vessel, the earth vessel of body. Yeah. There's something I wanted to say at some point too. I really highly recommend checking out the movie Castaway with Tom Hanks, right? And feel into its movement through the astrological archetypes. It's like unreal. It kind of starts Sagittarian, definitely Capricorn, and goes all the way through and then some. Does a little retrogrades here and there, really focuses on these quadrants, but it's a cool study of astrology. It's something I do with all my students. All right, so sacred work, that idea of illness, that idea of practice, and not polishing of the stone. So yeah, I'm a creator being, but what will I create? And let me get good at it before I come up to this world of light and relationship and visibility. Now, if I do too much of that, then I'll never come up, right? And as the world spins, these are the days of our lives. So I'm kind of moving out of baby day transmission here, and know that we're doing this every day, right? Every moment, every lifetime, every 7,021 lifetimes or whatever it is. This is the ancient 12-step program for a very important reason. And the sixth is immensely important. Really connecting to that truth of dialing it in, what it is that I can do, so that I can come up here into the light, you know, into visibility. And I have something to bring. So what? To relating, yeah? To the outward relating now. So there's a lot of relationship in the first quadrant, in the personal zone too, but it's kind of relating to answer the needs of the vessel as I'm learning what it is that I am. But now we're starting to relate, you know, in this way. I like to say Libra, if we compare her to the seventh house, is the air that we share. you know, the air that carries the waves of voice and vision one to the other. And that place of partnership. And we know, you know, we hear that word and it's like, okay, who's my spouse? Who's the soulmate? Whatever. But we know this could be like a business partner. It even said could be an enemy, you know. But one thing about the houses above, 7 through 12, we can always reflect to the houses below. So 7th is like 1, but it's we instead of me. Yeah. So what is the we? Well, if the we is a business partnership, what is that? If the 7th is marriage, you know, what is that? That contract of marriage, they would say. And many look to the 7th for commitment, but I actually feel that in the 8th house. So speaking of wishes and wounds, what are the wishes of the 6th? You know, I want to perfect this thing and get really good at it. Wounds, I can't. Or I'm so buried in my perfections and so hard on myself, I'll never come out into the world. A lot of wisdom from the marriage of those two. What are the wishes of the 7th? Relating. Equal relating. Partnerships. Which is a really interesting study if you think about some animosity relationship too. I like to say the 8th is the house of the honeymoon. Wounds of the 7th, by the way, also, I will never be seen for who I am. I will never see another for who they are. We will never meet kind of eye to eye. I will not know what it is to walk in their shoes or they in mine. So the 8th, the house of the honeymoon, why? Because, you know, in ancient times, the 5th really was the place of like romance and passion, because I can do anything I want. The 7th in marriage more, which was more kind of contracts or, you know, social choice, or families, you know, marrying you to someone maybe you didn't want to marry, or maybe astrologically assigned, probably not the worst idea. But the 5th in that place of passions, well, these days we often think of that as the 8th, right? So what happens in the honeymoon suite? And let me take this a little bit more gently at first. What if the 7th is a business partner? Well, the 8th now is that place, they say, other people's resources. Remember, if I reflect the 2nd, what feeds me, into the 8th, what feeds we? Yeah. So in that commitment to partnership, if the 7th is a business partner, now in the 8th, our names hang together above the door, and our success is married to one another. So if the business partner is not doing the job and my investment fails because of them, that's a pretty rough time up there. Yeah. But the 8th, what feeds we open to some buffet that there are no stag invites extended for, you know. So in that quest of relationship, and why I say the house of the honeymoon, and this would be the last place of this 2nd season, if we think of 3 seasons of 4, opening the heart of othership. That's the deep heart. That's the heart broken open. Yeah. So I had to learn trust to develop my heart. And how can I ever really come into heartfelt relationship and true authentic relationship if I haven't? That's a wound that I think a lot of us are playing with in some level or another. But the house of the honeymoon, the door closes and we get fully tantric and we fully merge. Yeah. And now this other buffet is opening, something in relating that I can never access on my own, you know? And we've all had those relationships where we starve ourselves just trying to feed the monster. Yeah, no good. Some of us many, many, many times. That's one of the fun patterns in life in the earth game at this time. But what about those relationships that help you understand that those old needs now are kind of wants, because there's a whole different kind of food alive for you up there? But also, what happens when you merge in this way? When you open that relationship heart and you bond so deeply. So people come here for counseling for wedding times a lot. It's one of my favorite things to do. And I always ask them to bring 7 words of what this marriage is about. So we kind of call in the planets as significators to symbolize in this ceremony the intention of this marriage. The second thing I do is say, look, here's the gig. You're going to die and you're going to die to give birth to the you together, right? Because when we merge in such a deep way, so even if it was the marriageless me that's dying in the case of marriage, in this deep merger, part of me, the relationshipless me, dies. And it's a really profound question in the 8th. I think it's one of the reasons why death is alive there. Looking at it from the diurnal way, as I did earlier, this is the place where the sun going down to the 7th, especially if there's a bunch of trees or hills or mountains, like the sun is literally going to die for sunset, even before it reaches the horizon to our eyes. But other people's resources, again, because what feeds we? And in that eye of something dies, well, typically in the earth game, it is those times when we begin to ask why. Yeah, so the heart broken, a very silly term in our language. We all know the heart is actually working overtime when those initiations come our way. It's the heart broken open, and it doesn't always feel so great. Or death and loss around us. Yeah. Why? What are the reasons for the seasons? What is this place? So much of that comes alive at the end of the 8th, where in the core kind of shared interpersonal heart, we find this birth of othership and the death of self, a very confusing initiation that often has us shaking fists at the sky and asking why. And then we enter the 9th and we enter this last season. So the 9th, why? What is this place? What am I doing here? How do I get out of here? Do I even want to? You know, the great mysteries, the 9th, the place of the vision quest. So they say what? Long distance travel, higher education. I mean, the 9th could be your master's degree. It could be you looking for the master. Right? So other cultures, other places. Why? Because we learn so much more about the mystery and also opening to a relationship with something higher than self. Or maybe you see that something is lower. I don't want to just say up is good and down is bad and perpetuate that idea. But there's something more than me. And in that feeling and interpersonal of this death and that pain, you know, and those wounds that open in that way, and seeing death around us and wondering what is this place, we enter, I think, in a way with the 9th that not everyone will. So the 9th might just be your higher education, whatever. That's not true for all of you who are watching this right now. You come to the mysteries. Yeah, you probably have been broken open in one way or 1,000 and asked why, and looking for something, some truth, some higher truth. Yeah, communicating with something greater. So we can play this game too if 9th is the reflection of 3rd, which is learning how to communicate the needs of me. Well, the 9th would be learning how to communicate the needs 8th of we, 7th. And that's a fun way to play these games too. But that vision quest, and I like to say the house of the revelation. So what are the wishes? Finding higher truth. What are the wounds? You never can. Yeah. But seeking is certainly something we should do. And we might just find faith as we try. We might find a cool teacher. We might find so much in that realm, which can be confusing but amazing. And we're looking through the veil. This is the place where the sun was set to joy. So a lot of wisdom can be gained there. We want to be careful not to think that we've found some higher truth and stop our quest before our last breath. So the 9th is a very amazing place. And I think it allows us in receiving this revelation of applying this 6th way of sacred work into what we can actually do here in the real world. How many of us are working a job that aligns with our magic and what we know we want to do as a soul. The ninth is a really cool place that can connect 6th and 10th in that regard. Because the 6th, it's interesting, I've heard the 6th and 10th, you know, the 6th is your kind of like worky work, slave wage, and the 10th is what you're great at and what you really want to do and hobbies and stuff. I've tend to felt it the other way, that the 6th is this place of sacred work, and the 10th is what you do in the world. And aligning the two is such an amazing thing, but so often we're asking, who am I? What do I do? I mean, that's my most common question here at my Astrology table, right? What am I supposed to do? So looking at the 6th and the 10th in this way, and kind of seeing that vision of the 9th that can relate the two, is a very beautiful thing I've found. So the house of revelation, the 9th, the house of vocation in the 10th, and visibility in the height of the light. So we hear honor, reputation, these kinds of things, you know. How can I be my highest self? How can I show myself in that way, in an honorable way, and be true in that regard? And if I can, like if I'm literally walking my walk and I know it's right, then I enter into the 11th in a good way. We can enter all of these places and all levels of the way, right? But that 11th place, the flip of the 5th. The 5th, I can do anything I want. The 11th, we can do anything we want. What do we want to do? We want to change the world. That's what we came here for. And oh my goodness, this is necessary more and more in a time when nature and normal are about as far divorced as possible. So if I can receive that revelation, align myself to my true direction in vocation, I'm then seen by chosen family, community, circle, consortium, the band, the crew, that 11th house, right? And they can live in the 4th, they can live in lots of different places, but this idea of 11th house in groups, but for me, it's those that we choose to seed the revolution with. But how many times do we connect with crews that are committed to perhaps a false cause, or something that's never going to come through, or giving our energy to something that might be a loss? And so I think it's really important. I like to say, you know, why is the revolution not televised? Well, maybe because the cats who control the media don't want to show it, but maybe more importantly, because it's not beautiful, because it's not true. And receiving the revelation, the 9th house, bringing that through the 10th house to the 11th. Now, this is a revolution that's worthy, that's beautiful, that's worth seeing, that brings true change. And yes, we can do anything we want in the 11th. For me, 5th, there's so much in this axis of creation, inspiration coming from will. And in the 11th, imagination, that antenna to like the collective, and really feeling that pulse of the world and knowing that we can make a change when we are walking in our way. What are the wounds of the 10th? I don't know what I'm here to do. Nobody sees me for my gifts. Yeah, I'm broke trying to do this thing that people just don't get. Am I ahead of my times, you know? What are the wishes of the 11th? Coming into that community. I mean, I just, the last few years have found community here, and it's such an amazing blessing to walk with people who are deeply committed to authenticity, where we don't ask, how are you doing, as a greeting, you know, because you can expect like a 30-minute answer and you want to be there for people. And I love that. And people who are really trying to contemplate and commit themselves to bringing change in our own lives, in our communities, and knowing that we'll reach out into the world. And this is a gift that I hope everyone will receive. It's, you know, so common for me to be speaking online with people who feel that they are living in a remote place where they're the only one looking into the mysteries, and they feel so alone. I feel one of the common ingredients of the mystical awakening is that feeling of isolation, but it's also in so many ways contributes to what in alchemy we call the calcination. And dissolution, and then through the separation of me with the people that I used to relate to, because I don't anymore, there's that isolation. We learn insulation, and now we can come into this idea of crew and chosen family in a real way, in a way that will make, you know, profound change in this world. And if we experience that in our own lives, that's a beautiful thing. If we experience that in community, that's like a whole nother level. Will that actually work to change the world? Changed yours. So the wish is to have a crew, you know, and again, for all these things, look at the sign on the cusp, play the games, look at the ruler of that sign. Where do they live? How are they aspected? These many wonderful techniques of the ancient 12-step program of astrology, which is really trying to lead us to the heart of the 12th, the one heart, the return to the waters of the womb, the great womb, the endless cosmic womb of mother, you know, the great circle of spirit. So return to source and finding some of those things that I left in the womb when I came traumatically into this life's experience. You know, what do we find at that time of the end of the day in this regard, of closing the eyes and going to sleep and opening our dreams and receiving these visions? Maybe in the voices of the animal and plant spirits, you know, we're learning messages. Connecting to ancestors, that might happen more down in the fourth, you know. But not necessarily. There's so much in the dream and this cohesion of this truth, question mark, that we are all one, that we all share a heart. So a lot of wish of that reconnection to unity consciousness, we call it a lot these days. What are the wounds? Can we? What are the wounds? What if I do feel the one collective heart of the entire world or universe? There's a lot of pain there, you know. And do I fully want to merge myself once again with the infinite? Or do I want to wake up in the morning? You know, depends what day you ask me personally. But I choose to wake up. So it's not my time yet, that's for sure. And I think that's a really wonderful thing about this wheel of life, that it begins every day and every life, you know. Every project that you start, you can play this game through the nativity. And I would encourage you to look at the progress chart. Look at that as like a different route through the 12. So many endless ways to pet the cosmic cat and journey through the ancient 12-step program called Astrology. And I really am grateful for you spending your time with me for this session tonight, and the strange softwares, and then a lot of just rapping. And so the most important thing that I could ever extend is realign your astrology to nature. The third house is an actual place. It's an actual direction. You could face it right now. You could send your energy right there, right now, and feel and learn directly from that place. Witness what happens when the sun is in that place. See what the light is like outside. What animals do you hear? What animals don't you hear? Yeah. And we will kind of take it from there on the next journey that I bring to EA Zoom meetings in November, Sacred Astronomy for Astrologers. So thanks again. I'm definitely happy to hear any questions if you guys want to stay on, but I know this is like the fourth or fifth of presentations today, this amazing resource, you know. So let me just say one other thing, which is deep gratitude for EA Zoom meetings, for bringing astrologers together to share their explorations in these mysteries. I mean, what an amazing gift. And in this strange dawning of the age of Aquarius, that we can meet globally online like this and play these games too. So thanks to all of you too. And finally, though you're not my students, this is what I say to them. I'm not here to teach you my astrology. I'm here to further remind you to remember yours. We each have our own gift that we are bringing to this beautiful being called astrology. And as we bring our own unique connection and expression, she grows and she heals too.
So
Something you,
Gemini, thank you so much.
you're
That was
welcome.
fantastic. Okay, any questions, anyone?
We're all in the 12th house days. I usually cry a bunch when I give this rap. So that didn't happen tonight.
Okay, my question is, how do you do it?
How do I talk for 7 hours straight without taking a breath?
Yeah, and how do you know so much? You must have been some kind of an astrologer in a past life. Yeah, do you know your past
I
lives?
wonder, I mean, I'm really new to astrology in this particular monkey suit. It was
Uh-huh.
October of 2012 when I first was encouraged to have a reading.
Wow.
And December of 2012, with Jupiter right at my ascendant, when in the jungles of Peru, I had this strange 4-hour conversation with Jupiter that began with "sit down, boy" and ended with "now go spread the word." And I basically took those marching orders with great intent and shifted my life pretty quickly. I went down to Peru for the great 2012 end of the world, and my old world very much ended to give birth to this one. And yeah, I don't have personal experiences of past lives. I still kind of contemplate if that's the way that this great thing works. It feels true for me, and this is one of the ways where that has felt pretty true. I've had one experience at Chichen Itza where there's an amazing observatory there where I just broke down crying, feeling like I used to work there or something. But more importantly, um, I'm engaged with study with brilliant astrologers like yourself, and in the academic approach somewhat, but I go to the sky and honor these planetary guides and guidesses as living beings, and introduce myself and ask them to introduce themselves to me. And I've only heard one speak that one time. Usually they'll show up in dreams or whatever it may be. But just taking what I'm learning also in the books or these webinars and going out to the sky gives me time to contemplate and to integrate all these different things I'm receiving. And so, I mean, just being with the 12th house and sitting there, it's like, oh, trees. That's why the 12th house is hidden things, right? So this is available to all of us, right? And anything that we're doing, we learn in school these days, not necessarily to learn. We're kind of on this memorize, regurgitate, rinse, and repeat trip. That's one of the great things that we're caused to free ourselves from in the so-called awakening or whatever this thing is that we're playing. But nature herself, and astrology is nature. She has so much information for us. It's endless, and it lives in the library of ourselves.
So Gemini, so your next meeting coming up in a few months, I think, the sacred marriage of heaven and earth. So we look forward to that. That will be on November 30th, the sacred astronomy for astrologers. So we're looking forward to that. Thank you very much from all of us. And any final questions before we go?
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Faye, somebody in the chat said, this talk has been very powerful for me. It has helped me understand myself and my place in the world so much better. Very moving.
Oh,
I'm so grateful for your words. So thank you, Faye, for that. And
thank you so much, Faye. Yeah, you know, these houses, they're really cool. I started in the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School, which does not have a strong emphasis on the houses of the chart. I mean, they're very archetypal sign-based astrology. There's very like aspect-based astrology. There's very house-based astrology. There's a lot of ways to pet the cosmic cat. And I kind of was called to initiate myself into the ways of the houses when doing like times of speed readings, like if an eclipse is around, I get so many calls. It's like, okay, let's just do a bunch of half-an-hour sessions. And what can I do to give this person something? And going into the houses and where this might show up in the places, as they call them, or the stages of your life's expression, I found that to be so resonant with what was alive for people that I was just called in. And it's just always my practice. Say, okay, here it is. Here's the lists. Why? I'm going to take it to the sky. So thanks for that feedback, Faye. And I really hope that you'll find your own feeling for each of these houses, as along with learning academically what we've known for a long time, and see how it fits with people that you sit with.
Yeah, great. I especially really loved your description of the first house and being born. Beautiful. Lovely images. Thank you so much. So thanks from everybody, and unmuting everybody now to say thank you. See you next time, Gemini.
All
Bye.
right.
Thank
Aloha.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thanks a
Thank you,
lot.
Greg. Excellent. Always excellent.
This word.
Oh, yeah, we're done.
Beautiful, beautiful.
It's okay, we're still here.
Well, yeah, one thing I would say is, you know, I'm at morethan.astrology.com, and I cruise around and do storytelling events, and I really have a passion for bringing people out under the night sky to connect and teaching us how to see the sky and the chart. That's
Certainly, I will post your website and any information that you like underneath the videos.
cool.
Okay, great. Okay, bye for the second time. Bye, everyone.
Thank you again. Bye.
Bye.